Hello everyone, I'm Kavina Tamang from Group A and my team members are Amantim Sinha, Babita Tiwari, Umesh Pandey, Rohit Maharjan and Prois Pakurel. Today we will discuss case Churchill Falls, Labrador Corporation versus Hydro-Quebec 2018 SCC 46. Let's go to our next slide. Imagine signing a contract that lasts for decades only to realize years later that market conditions have changed and you're locked into a deal that no longer seems fair. Should you have the right to renegotiate? This is exactly the issue in Churchill Falls Labrador Corporation versus Hydro-Quebec, a landmark Supreme Court of Canada case that explores whether a party can force a contract renegotiation due to unforeseen changes. In 1969, Churchill Falls Labrador Corporation Limited and Hydro-Quebec entered into a historic agreement, a long-term contract for electricity supply. Decades later, as energy prices skyrocketed, Churchill Falls found itself bound by the same rates set years ago. They asked the courts, is it fair to be stuck in a contract that no longer reflects economic reality? Today, we will explore how the Supreme Court of Canada answered this question. So, let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about respondent Hydro-Quebec. It is the electricity provider that signed the contract with Churchill Falls. They agreed to purchase powers from Churchill Falls at a fixed rate for decades, ensuring a steady supply of electricity. When Churchill Falls tried to renegotiate, Hydro-Quebec refused the contract and arguing that the contract was legally binding and must be honored as written. Their stance was that contractual certainty is essential for business stability. The key issue, can a party force renegotiation of a long term contract due to unforeseen market changes? Churchill Falls argued that drastic economic changes made the contract unfair and that they should be allowed to renegotiate. Hydro-Quebec countered that contracts must remain enforceable regardless of market shifts. The Supreme Court of Canada had to decide, should contracts be modified when circumstances change or should they be upheld as originally agreed. That's all. That covers the background and key issue of the case. Now I'll pass it over to my friend who will walk us through the background facts.
Hi everyone, I'm Prois Pakurel. I'm going to explain about the background facts of this presentation. The background facts provides context for the case Churchill Falls Corporation versus Hydro-Quebec by explaining the origin of the disputes. Why is it essential for us to understand the facts of this case is to grasp why Churchill Falls Corporation took Hydro-Quebec to court and how the contractual disagreement arose. So looking back at the time, the 1969 power contract, it is written at the background. CFLC took the Hydro-Quebec implemented CFLC together with the Hydro-Quebec implemented this long-term power agreement during 1969. The Churchill Falls hydroelectricity project is Labrador underwent constructions by CFLCOs while the company operated the facility, yet needed significant financial investment, by which Hydro-Quebec became the major financier of the project by accepting a 65-year-old electricity price guarantee in return, which led to Hydro-Quebec acquiring most of the electricity through this agreement under a contractual fixed purchase agreement while they marketed their power supply as needed. CFLCO confronted market change after the signing of their power agreement, which led to power prices rose sharply because of inflation together with energy crisis which occurred throughout multiple years. The price set by the 1969 contract allowed Hydro-Quebec to acquire power at the low cost, uh, which they subsequently sold at high price for sustainable profits. After which CFLCs established that the market price changes brought no additional values, so they believed the 65-year-old contract entered into an outdated state, which led CFLCO's request for renegotiation. The company requested Hydro-Quebec to revise the existing agreement according to the current market value of electricity, but the company rejected the project levels achieved by Hydro-Quebec since they believed that both fairness and equity principles were violated, which led to Hydro-Quebec taking a firm stance by asserting that the contract needed to be followed according to its original wording, which led legal disputes to begin. Looking at the time, the year 2010 brought CFLCOs to the Quebec Superior Court when they filed a lawsuit against Hydro-Quebec for contract modification based on new economic realities. Hydro-Quebec owned its customers both good faith and fair bargaining according to the plaintiffs. By saying all this, we have to look why are these facts important. To understand why are these facts important, it's just that the company presented its case to explain how fixed price payments from Hydro-Quebec caused economic disparities. The fundamental disputes emerged between CFLCOs desiring fair pricing based on market rates, but Hydro-Quebec demanded strict contract compliances. The legal fight between the companies produced various appeals which led to their case reaching the Supreme Court for its 2018 resolutions.
Hi everyone, my name is Umesh Pandey, and today I'll be presenting on the procedural history of the case Churchill Falls versus Hydro-Quebec. Let's talk about these cases. This case was from 1969 when Churchill Falls Labrador Corporation and Hydro-Quebec signed a contract for the purchase of electricity. The contract set fixed prices for 65 years, meaning that CFLC will receive the same payment for electricity even the market price rise or and the market will fall down. There will not be any changes according to the contract. Over the time, Hydro-Quebec made huge profit, but CFLCO fails to make the profit, and they were set for the fixed payment according to that contract. And this leads and the CFLCO leads that they want to renegotiate it of the contract, arguing that the original terms were no longer economically fair. In 2010, CFLCO filed a lawsuit in the Quebec Superior Court requesting that the contract be modified due to unforeseen financial imbalance that had occurred. They claimed that Hydro-Quebec had made unfair profit, a lot of profit, while they were stuck in the same criteria, same disadvantages deal. However, in 2014, the court dismissed CFLC claims, stating that Quebec law does not allow contract to be modified simply due to economic hardship. They have to continue their deal according to their agreement, written agreement. The court emphasized that contracts must be honored at return, and that any changes will be supported by legal grounds. They are not accepting these decisions, and CFLC appealed to the Quebec Court of Appeal in 2016, arguing that Hydro Quebec had a duty to renegotiate the court under the principle of good faith and equity. However, the Court of Appeal rejected their appeal, reaffirming that the contract was legally binding and there was no obligations for Hydro-Quebec to renegotiate. Finally, CFLC brought the cases to the Supreme Court of Canada in 2018, hoping for a different ruling and hoping for the changes of the contract. On November 2, 2018, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Hydro-Quebec and confirmed the lower court decision and stating that Hydro-Quebec had no obligation to renegotiate the contract. The court emphasized that contracts once agreed upon should be respected as written, ensuring legal certainty and business stability. It has clearly clarified that the CFLCO has to continue their legal agreement as they said before. And this case highlighted the importance of contractual certainty in commercial agreement and how courts generally avoiding intervening in contracts that were freely negotiated if they become economically unfair over time. Thank you. And the next part will be continued by my friend. Thank you.
Hello everyone. So before we dive into the court's decision, it's important to understand how the legal dispute developed. CFLCO filed a lawsuit against Hydro-Quebec in 2010, claiming the original contract had become too one-sided. Hydro-Quebec was making huge profit while CFLCO felt left behind. They wanted the contract to be renegotiated, arguing that fairness, good faith, and economic changes required it. The lower courts, both the Quebec Superior Court and the Quebec Court of Appeal, rejected this and upheld the contract as valid. This shows that from the start, the courts were leaning towards respecting the original contract, even if it seems unfair now. This legal battle is what eventually reached the Supreme Court, where the core issues become should fairness override a binding agreement. Now on this slide, on the slide 7, we get to the heart of the legal issue. CFLCO argued that Hydro-Quebec had a legal and moral obligation to renegotiate because the contract had become unfair over time. They believed principles like good faith and equality should allow for adjustments when unexpected economic outcomes happen. But Hydro-Quebec countered this by saying that the contract was clear, legal, and freely agreed upon. They claimed there is no legal requirement to renegotiate just because one side is making more profit. So the key legal issue was, does Quebec law allow a contract to be changed simply because it turned out to be economically unfair for one party, or should the law strictly enforce what was agreed upon no matter the outcome? This question sets the stage for how the Supreme Court would rule, whether to prioritize fairness or uphold contract certainty. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm going to talk about the holding and the Supreme Court rationales, contract enforcement. So let's begin with the rationale. So first of all, the Supreme Court ruled in the favor of the Hydro-Quebec. This is because it means that Supreme Court sided with the Hydro-Quebec in the legal disputes. So next one is no legal obligations to renegotiate the contract. This is because court did not find any legal basis to renegotiate the contract between the parties. So that's why the court did not renegotiate that. So next one is the unjust enrichment claim was dismissed. So this is likely to happen because based on the principle of the unjust enrichment, where one party unfairly benefit at the expense of the another, was rejected by the court. So let's go to the next slide. So likewise, the contract was binding under the Quebec civil law. So this indicates that the court determined the contract in question was legally valid and enforceable according to the civil law system in Quebec. So this is significant because Quebec operates under a civil law system, because this is quite different from the common law systems, because in the most part of the Canada common law system is used. So likewise, Hydro-Quebec was entitled to continue benefits from the fixed electricity rates. So although the hydroelectricity was making the huge profit, they were getting benefits for this to continue, because this suggests that the contract stipulated fixed rates for the electricity and the court upheld Hydro-Quebec rights to continue charging those rates. So this likely was the central point of contentions in the legal disputes. So next one is the court emphasizes freedom of contract and the business certainty. So this highlights the legal principle of the court relied upon in reaching its decision. So freedom of a contract is the idea that party should party are free to enter into agreements without undue interference. So likewise, business certainty refers to the importance of having stable and predictable contractual obligations for the business to operate efficiently. So these are the holdings of these cases. So let's talk about the another slide. Okay, let's talk about the Supreme Court rationales and the legal principle. So first of all, freedom of the contract. So the Supreme Court emphasizes the importance of the freedom of a contract. So this means that both party had willingly negotiated and agreed to the contract in the 1969. So Hydro-Quebec took on the financial risks, including like project funding in the exchange for the fixed pricing, and the court made it clear that it should not be interfered with the contract that were freely agreed upon unless there was a strong legal reason to do so. So for that, court should not rewrite freely negotiate agreement without a legal basis. So next one is doctrine of imprevisions. So this means unforeseeability. So this is not recognized. So like CFLCO argued that the contract should be adjusted because the doctrine of the unforeseeability, which allow contract modification when unexpected economic events make them like agreement unfair. So however, the court ruled that Quebec civil law does not recognize this principle, because reinforcing that contract remain stable even if the economic condition changes. So this means the court ruled that Quebec civil law does not allow contract change due to the unexpected economic shift. So likewise, no obligations to renegotiate. So CFLCO also claimed that Hydro-Quebec had an obligation to renegotiate their contract due to the fairness and the good faith. But in this case also, the court rejected these arguments, stating that while good faith is important, it doesn't mean like a company is required to renegotiate a valid contract just because of the circumstance have changed. So in this case also, the court goes on the favor of the Hydro-Quebec. So from my side, this much. Thank you.
My name is Babita Tiwari, and let's begin with our slides. So let's talk about absence of abuse of rights. So the court ruled that Hydro-Quebec was not abusing its right, it was simply enforcing the contract as agreed upon. There was no bad faith, no explanation, just market conditions shifting in its favor. The court emphasizes that fairness does not require a negotiation just because one party benefits more over time. So let's get into the another section, that is precedent and legal consistency. So this decision aligned with the past ruling on contractual stability in Quebec law, upholding the contract, ensuring consistency if contracts could be modified whenever market condition changes. Business would force uncertainty in the business. This ruling enforced that legal binding agreements must be respected as written. It should be respected like in the written form only. Doesn't matter what conditions applies after having written conditions. So what about the final judgment? Ultimately, the Supreme Court upheld the contract, confirming its validity and enforceability. Hydro-Quebec had no legal duty to share additional profits with CFLCOs. This case reaffirms that contract remained binding regardless of financial shifts, reinforcement the principle of legal certainty in business agreements. Was this ruling legally correct? Yes or no? I think this is yes, but was it fair? That's up for the debate. Yeah, it's really a good question for a debate. We should have a debate on this. So let's get into the another slide. So let's talk about conclusion and its implications. So what does this decision mean for business and contract law? Let's get into our key elements, that is business stability. Like this ruling reassure business that long-term contracts will not be altered by a court, ensuring predictability in agreements. And what are the legal precedent? It sets a strong precedent in Quebec law. Improvisation, which means enforceability as well, cannot be used to modify our contracts even in extreme economic circumstances. And what is equity versus certainty? While the decision support legal certainty, it raises like ethical questions. Should fairness ever override strict contract enforcement or not? So I have a really good question as well. Like, would it be more just if court could intervene when contracts become unfair or like due to drastic economic changes? This is really a good question. So let's wrap up and get into our last slide. So this is our last slide and we will wrap up and we will end our presentation. In summary, this case confirms that contractual agreements must be respected as written even when circumstances changes, like any circumstances like economic circumstances, environmental, any private circumstances, anything comes, but it remains as written. But what do you think? Like, should courts step in a contract or step in while the contract become highly unfair over time? This is really a good question to ask. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, any answers, or any thoughts about our presentation, we'll be happy to hear. Thank you so much for your time. This is the end of our presentation. We are very grateful that you gave us the opportunity to our presentation. Thank you so much.